Let's talk more about the sex robot brothel that you visited. You mentioned this in a slightly tantalizing way. So it was in Vienna, is that right?
Yeah, it was in Vienna. There are about 20 sex doll brothels now over the world.
Wow.
I went to Barcelona first, but then that one was already shut down when I got there, which is telling because I mentioned this because I think, yes, they pop up, but they also close down again, oftentimes because they don't really work. But we can talk about that. But the dolls are very impractical. They're very heavy still. I also think there's another problem that people don't acknowledge overtly, but that is exactly what I was just mentioning now. Clients might come in out of curiosity, or perhaps there's a very small niche that actually finds the dolls very arousing, but I think it's a very small niche. And I think for the other clients, you might go there once or twice and you're kind of done. But yeah, so I had to go to Vienna, and I wanted to try it out. And so I just did what clients do there, namely rent a doll. And if I may, I mean, just before we go into that story, what I find really interesting is that there is this group of feminists who say, well, it's a really good idea because now we can have sex dolls instead of real human sex workers. And they see it as liberating for these human sex workers. And I can totally follow that line of thinking because I also see a lot of problems with sex work. I've, as you know, also spent some chapters on talking about that. I've done a lot of interviews with sex workers. I'm often really depressed thinking of the circumstances in which so many of them work, not by far not all of them, but a large amount, yes. And I see, I would really love to see that differently in the future. However, I'm not sure if the sex dolls are offering the right solution because the sex dolls, I mean, if you would imagine a world in which all of us would have sex with sex dolls or even have romantic relationships with sex dolls, like we just established, kind of you don't train the things that make us kind and patient and democratic in a sense, right? It's just like an inflation of our ego because we see ourselves echoed all the time. So yes, maybe if it was a large group of people who would be really, really just as interested in having a doll to have sex with instead of a human being, then it might be a solution for the sex workers, although then you would also have to provide them with another job because many of them are really in precarious situations. But the sex dolls in themselves, I really don't find a good idea for this society. Yeah, and then I went to the brothel. I rented a male sex doll, which are in the minor. I mean, there's not many made. If you look at on the website, so the websites work in the same way in which you can, I guess, order a girl in a sex brothel. So you really just click through the body type because that is it, right? You click through the body type that you want, which is not a very problematic aspect. And of course, most of these dolls, they are the female dolls. They look very stereotypical, sexist female. So they have huge breasts, um, beautiful forms. You can choose the hair, you can choose the shape of vaginas. It's really weird to do that. But I did it with a man, and then I had the problem that resembled a bit what so many people I think have on dating apps, namely that I chose this male doll and it looked kind of handsome on the photos. And of course, I was, this for me was a very weird experiment. So, as an anthropologist, just to explain, I do use my own body, my own experience as one of the research methodologies. So, as anthropologists, you study the people that you do research on from their perspective. So if I want to do research on sex dolls, I kind of need to understand what it does to at least me so that I can think into how it would affect other people. So I chose this doll and its name was Nick. And it said on the bio text, and this might make me really naive, but it said, Nick, I'm Nick. I'm a 35-year-old instructor of climbing. I think that's what it said. And I'm a rock climber. Like me and my husband like to rock climb. So I think for me, that was kind of like, we match, Nick and me. This is the doll. And then, of course, I got there and everything was different, right? Like First of all, Nick was wearing hair on the photo that I'd seen, but now he was completely bald. What they also don't tell you on the photos or on the bio of these dolls is that they are very tiny. They're very tiny. They're like Madame Tussauds real, so they look extremely real, but they're very tiny. So this doll was probably like 1 meter 60 in centimeters. I'm not sure what that is in inches, Louise.
5'4",
Kind of small
something like
for
that. So like like an
short.
average size woman.
Yeah, but for a man, I expected a taller person.
Mm-hmm.
And then the real problem is that they just lie there on the bed. I mean, flat, horizontal, and of course, in this case, with a firm erection upwards, because otherwise, it's not going to be possible to have sex with it, which I think was very scary because it looked like a real person, but a very dead person with their eyes open towards the ceiling. I mean, I'm not sure how other people do
It
that,
sounds
but for
so
me, it didn't really
creepy.
work.
So can they not really
Yeah.
move? How much do they move? How much?
They can move a little bit,
Uh-huh.
which I thought was really, really creepy,
Yeah.
actually. Some of them can move as if they're breathing.
Yeah.
So you can feel the chest rising and falling, but then the chest is completely cold because it's rubber.
This just
And
sounds
so
horrible. And
I
they
know, Louise,
can't get
it's
up,
really
and they don't walk. They
no, not
okay.
yet. I mean, they're trying to do this. They're also, they're trying all the things to make it more convincing to people, which
Uh-huh.
I don't really think is going to make it more attractive. Actually, it might even get more creepy, right?
Yeah.
They now have some dolls that can talk, but they can say like little phrases, like really arousing phrases. And then what I find really, really disturbing is now that the industry is saying, well, because there's been a lot of criticism on these dolls, right? Is it not doing what porn can do, right? Giving people the wrong inspiration, so to speak. I mean, some of these dolls, especially the female dolls, they look like very, very young women, as in teenage women. Would you really want to have a lot of men kind of be trained neurologically to find that arousing? I always believe that porn has an education. I don't mean to say that in a good way, but if you see a lot of the same porn, you kind of get aroused by that type of sex, right, more easily. And I could see the same with these dolls. And then, of course, the industry now, their latest thing is to say, oh, but we have dolls that say, I have a headache, I don't want to have sex, which is supposedly then training the male users that they cannot get all they want. I'm just not sure that humans work like
No,
that.
and also in reality, of course, there's nothing. I mean, the dolls aren't going to like fight back, are they?
Exactly. Then you
Yeah.
could just, ignore that,
Yeah.
which might give the opposite idea. But again, I just don't think that a lot of men will find this arousing. I can see that there might be a niche. I mean, maybe men who are imprisoned for the rest of their lives, maybe, but that would be about it, whatever the industry is
Or
saying.
specific fetishes. I mean, it's quite
Yeah,
necrophiliac adjacent, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, there are fetishes that are must be really hard to live with, because if that really is the only thing that turns you on, I mean, I agree with you. Then that might work for them. But saying that the wider population, nah, don't think so. They're very expensive as well.
Diana Fleischman, evolutionary psychologist and a friend of mine, she suggested that the people who are most likely to find sex dolls tolerable or attractive are men who are very autistic. So men who already basically are less sensitive to the uncanny valley creepiness because they're less sensitive to human expression and emotion and so on anyway, that they might find sex dolls okay, or sex robots. But I think most people, I mean, particularly for women, it's just so unthinkable. I'm not at all surprised that you couldn't actually go through with having
No,
sex with Nick.
it it
I would,
makes sense
yeah,
what your friend says.
yeah.
I think you also see a crossover with the autistic spectrum and some working environments, right? Where you just see a type of brains function really well. And sometimes in some forms of autism, these people can also feel socially awkward or unable to really, relate to humans in another way. And then, yes, there are perhaps solutions like this, or, this could be easier, or at least not terrifying for them.